Yo, so we are back in today ranking the top 35 rookie prospects heading into the 2025 Fantasy Football Dynasty season, man. If you're on the clock, where you want to draft these guys. Now, this isn't a mock draft. We're going to have a bunch of mock drafts coming soon, so please smash the like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on all the great Dynasty content we're going to have coming. Even non-Dynasty leagues will have tons of content too, but today we're going over my rankings of the top 35 guys. It's actually really cool. I have the prospect profiles of all these guys pulled up. I have the stat lines for all of these guys pulled up, and I'm going to break down my rankings. Now, the mock drafts are not going to be as linear as some of these rankings. We'll go over that in some of these future videos. And even today, the first guy, the number one prospect, Ashton Jeanty. He went from a 1,900 total yard sophomore season to a 2,700 total yard junior season. Talk about, raising the ceiling. Elite contact balance, works through contact as well as any prospect since Bijan Robinson. Ooh, he had a pretty good season, huh? Jeanty went from he showed a high-end receiving ability in his second year as well. If we look at his actual receiving totals, I don't really know what they're yapping about. He only had 23 receptions for 138 receiving yards. Now, keep in mind, he had 2,600 rushing yards. The previous season, I saw some, signs that he can catch the ball in a PPR format. He had 1,300 rushing yards. Obviously, he took a double that in his final year. But in that season where his rushing total was lower, he had 43 receptions for 600 receiving yards. So the reception can also boost this guy's ceiling. I think, I'm not doing a mock draft today, but he could be the one of one. In fact, if he's not the one of one, you're selling or you're a quarterback needy team. But the quarterbacks ain't great. Up next, my number 2 on the big board, Omarion Hampton. Now, a lot of people might have other guys ranked a bit higher, but he's carried the North Carolina offense for 2 years, even when Drake May was the quarterback. He has 2 straight years of 1,500 plus rushing yards and 15 touchdowns, solid receiving potential in the NFL as well. He's a shifty runner who can hit the home run, and he has lead back written all over him. Now, Ashton Jeanty is going to get day 1 capital in the draft. Is Omarion Hampton going to go day 1? It's more likely that he goes at the very end of round 1 or even early day 2, which is a bit, you don't like to see that. He had 38 receptions and 373 receiving yards in his final season, so I do like the reception amount that he was getting in North Carolina. He's the one of 2 in my opinion. There's also a bunch of other guys depending on the needs of your team. Caleb Johnson is my 3rd ranked prospect. Now, I rank running backs a little bit higher than other people, and this year's draft class is very, very good for running back. So, I wouldn't fault you if you raise some of the other positions higher, because you're not going to get some of these other positions later on. You're going to get some deeper running backs later on in the draft. Caleb Johnson, though, he's a good guy, man. He's got 1,500 rushing yards in his final season, as well as 188 receiving yards. Not as great as Jeanty, not as great as Hampton, but he's still a solid. He's a typical Iowa Hawkeye running back who grinds between the tackles while always turning his feet to gain additional yardage. Really good vision, really good balance, a nose for the end zone, never goes backwards, even when the O-line misses blocks. Underrated receiver as well. Now, I didn't specify if this is PPR or non-PPR, but if this is a non-PPR league, Caleb Johnson can raise a bit higher, in my opinion, just because he might not be as good of a receiver as some of these Jeanty, Hampton, who have shown it in their college career. I do think he's an underrated receiver. He just hasn't necessarily gotten the volume there in his college days. So those are my top 3 on the big board. Now, Ted McMillan. This guy is the S-tier receiver in this year's draft. If we look at his, his college seasons, very, very solid. He's going to be top 7, top 8 in this year's draft in terms of draft capital. So they're going to be invested to make this guy a stud. In 2023, he had 1,400 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. In 2024, he had 1,300 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns. So the capital is there, the stats are there. Ted McMillan is going to be a stud. Now, I've seen some mock drafts putting him to the Saints, which I do not necessarily like that landing spot, especially with the fact that Chris Olave is there. But, neither here nor there. He's the number 1 receiver prospect. The number 2 receiver prospect, and this is a bit controversial, is Luther Burden. Everyone's very, very high on Luther Burden, and the reason is Burden was a 5-star recruit, but he never really hit his stride at Missouri. As a sophomore, he had 1,200 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns, but then he fell back to only 676 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns this year, and the whole Missouri offense took a step back as well. So with that said, man, looking at his stats, he only had really 1 good solid season, but he has the hype. And he's going to be a day 1 draft pick. He's going to be getting the draft capital. So you got to have him at the top of your board. Travis Hunter's my next guy. And I have a feeling, guys, a bit controversial. Travis Hunter might end his way all the way down here by the time we're, really getting these dynasty drafts going. The reason being, man, NFL GMs have said, well, first of all, Travis Hunter's going top 3 in the draft. That's great. It's good capital. 10 to 20 snaps. 1-0 to 2-0. 20 snaps on offense per game, they're saying. If he's getting 10 to 20 snaps on offense, not 10 to 20 targets, 10 to 20 snaps, he's getting 1 target a game, man. 1 or 2 targets a game. I mean, he's shown. He's had that 1,300 receiving yard season. He's shown that he can be him. But I'm not spending my, early high draft capital in a dynasty league where I could be getting somebody where he's going to be this guy, Luther Burden, Ted McMillan, these running backs. They're getting 80% of the snap, 90% snap shares. Travis Hunter getting 10 to 20 snaps per game. That's like a 20% snap share. That is not good. And he's injury prone on defense then because he's, double the amount of work he's doing. It just doesn't feel good. Now the ceiling's very high. And if he breaks out as a receiver, the ceiling's as high as anyone else. I just think it's very risky, so that's why he's a bit lower. And he might be moving lower as we progress. Now we're going to the quarterbacks. Now Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders. Realistically, I don't like either of these prospects, and I wouldn't draft either of these prospects. If you're in a super flex league, that's kind of why I have them ranked this high, just because they are quarterbacks that you can, service with. They are probably going to get a chance to start in the NFL. Cam Ward had 4,300 passing yards in his final season, 39 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, not bad. Shedeur Sanders also had a solid year at Colorado. He had 4,100 passing yards and 37 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. Shedeur is probably a little bit less refined than Cam Ward. The thing that I don't like is that neither of these guys have the rushing ability. In fact, I'm going to talk about Jalen Milroe right now. Jalen Milroe, guys, this man is somebody who excites me. Jalen Milroe really is exciting because, yes, he only had like 2,500 passing yards. Jalen Milroe had like 800 rushing yards, man, or 600 rushing yards. I mean, Jalen Milroe is the guy where he can help your fantasy team win games, especially if you're in a 4-point passing touchdown league where rushing upside of quarterbacks is very important. I would not hate, if you're a quarterback needy team, drafting somebody that's not a quarterback round 1 and waiting and taking a shot on Jalen Milroe, because he can kind of be a league winner, I think, if he blossoms and develops in the right situation. Now, yes, he's a project, which kind of sucks, but I think that, I like Jalen Milroe more than either of these prospects. Jalen Milroe is worse than these two prospects, but for fantasy purposes, this guy can really help the team win. These two guys, there's already other quarterbacks in the league that, are passing quarterbacks that are better than these guys, more refined. So that's just my take. Quinshon Judkins is up next. Now, Judkins, he had a really, really good first season. 1,600 rushing yards and 130 receiving yards. He's not necessarily the receiving running back, but we've seen him be consistently at that 1,000-yard rushing mark ever since. The reason it went down is because he's now splitting with TreVeyon Henderson. So Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson, they're both going to be probably day 2 running backs, and they're both good guys, man. They're both very solid running backs. If these 3 running backs weren't getting drafted this year, then I would probably have these 2 right at the top of the board. So it's a very deep running back class, and you'd be getting a steal. You'd be happy if you got one of these 2 running backs in your Dynasty redraft rookie. Now, Tyler Warren. Tyler Warren is the man where he can be a league winner as well. 1,233 receiving yards, 104 receptions, 8 touchdowns. Nuts. 218 rushing yards for 4 touchdowns. That's nuts. This guy's a Taysom Hill type prospect. I've seen him linked to the Broncos and Sean Payton. That would be nuts. I've seen him linked to Stafford and the Rams. That would be nuts. The Dolphins even maybe. We'll have to see the landing spot, man. But Tyler Warren, even if you're not in a tight end premium league, Tyler Warren, he's got to be very high on my draft board. That's why he's here. Emeka Egbuka. Now, he kind of is a reception PPR type beast. And he took a step back to Jeremiah Smith, the 5-star prospect for Ohio State this season, where he wasn't the alpha in the offense. In 2022, he was the alpha, 1,100 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. 2024, 950 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns. He's basically Chris Olave. It's a very lazy comparison to make, but he is most likely compared to Chris Olave. Olave's acclimated to the NFL pretty well. So Emeka Egbuka, you're getting him at the end of round 1 at this point. We're top 10 right here. It's a late pick for a receiver that can potentially have a high ceiling. And he's going to command, his ADP right now is around 28. And who's drafting at 28? The person who's almost won the Super Bowl. So he's going to join a Super Bowl contender team, more likely than not, and he'll have a good quarterback. Ollie Gordon. Now, I'm a bit higher on Ollie Gordon than other people. The reason is, Ollie Gordon, yes, he had a terrible season. This guy it was a big disappointment. But his first season in the league, boys, Ollie Gordon was a man on a mission. I think he had 1,600 rushing yards. Now this season, massive fall off. The O-line was way worse. What if? What if Ollie Gordon can go back to when he had that amazing season? What if? What if he's that type of talent in the NFL? That's my thinking with Ollie Gordon. I think I'm higher on him than other people, but I saw the ceiling when he had that amazing year. Trey Harris. Trey Harris, people are calling him Mickey Mouse. He had 1,000 receiving yards in 8 games. 8 games, 8 games, 8 games. 130 receiving yards per game was what he was averaging. He had 7 touchdowns, 60 receptions. People are saying their offense was Mickey Mouse just because of their scheme and everything. I don't care if their offense was Mickey Mouse, bro. This dude had 1,000 receiving yards, 130 yards per game. I'll take that on my fantasy team. If you're getting 130 receiving yards per game and it's 3, 6, 9, 12, the 14th ranked prospect, that's pretty dang good. Colston Loveland is up next. Now, I'm lower on Colston Loveland than most people. I feel like he hasn't had the same type of seasons as some of these other guys. Now, he's going against good talent in the Big Ten. In 2024 and 2023. 2023, he had 650 receiving yards. 2024, he had 582 receiving yards. It's solid stuff. But compared to Tyler Warren, who doubled that, and compared to this guy we're going to get to soon, Harold Fannin Jr., people really like Loveland as a prospect. He's going to have round 1 capital, which is definitely intriguing. People are saying Loveland might even be the better fantasy football tight end than Tyler Warren. I don't know. Somebody explain it. Somebody explain it in the comments. I have him ranked, pretty fairly, I think. He might be falling down my board. I'm not lying. But, he is going to get the draft capital, so I see that argument. So that's why he's right here in my rankings. Alik Ayomanor. This guy has Drake London potential, a bit unrefined. 2023, 1,000 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. 2024, 830 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. So a little bit of a fall off. He has good size. Stanford receiver prospect. That's why he's ranked right here. Jalen Royals. Now, I am a bit higher on Jalen Royals than other people, but the reason being, this guy's final 4 games of the season. Let me just, let's just go over his 2023. 2023, 1,080 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns. That's pretty good. 2024, if we look at, he had 830 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. All right, so it's a fall off. Look at his last couple games. And this was, he got injured, right? So it was an injured season, I believe. But his last couple games, he had 11 catches, 188 yards, and a touchdown. 10 catches, 155 yards, and a touchdown. 9 catches, 211 yards, and 2 touchdowns. 10 catches, 112 yards, and a touchdown. Those stats are insane. Bit of a project. Is a team going to give him a chance as a wide receiver 2 eventually? I don't know. He might be that wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 type guy, which means he is kind of a boom or bust type of person, in my opinion, to be drafting. It's a bit more risky than the next couple guys, but his upside is limitless. Isaiah Bond is up next. I don't buy the hype on Isaiah Bond. The reason being, his breakout season at Alabama, he had 600 yards, and then he hasn't topped a 700-yard receiving season yet, ever. He was supposed to fill in for Xavier Worthy at Texas. Didn't necessarily do that at Texas. He kind of fell short of expectations. He only had 540 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. He did have 98 rushing yards on 4 attempts. He's got the athleticism. His combine is going to definitely boost his draft stock. He has the potential to be a day 1 draft pick, which would boost his stock even more. Maybe he goes higher up on this board, up around Emeka Egbuka, maybe a little bit lower. I'm not sold on him just based on his stat lines in his college career. He's never had a solid enough season to make me believe that he'd be relevant in the NFL. So that's why I'm a bit lower on him than other people. Xavier Restrepo and Tez Johnson. Both of these guys are good, but both people have concerns from NFL scouts. They're too small. They only play in the slot, blah, blah, blah. Those are what the NFL scouts are saying, which is lowering their draft stock. Now, Restrepo, his last 2 seasons, he had 1,000 receiving yards, 1,100 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns, and 11 touchdowns. And he's had 85 receptions and 69 receptions. So he took a step up in 2024 from 2023, and he was playing with Cam Ward, solid play. Again, there's better prospects on the board. He's a good prospect, which is why he's ranked this high for me. He'll be a good round 2 pick in Dynasty leagues, but there's better wide receiver talent available. Tess Johnson is a little bit similar. In 2023, he had 1,200 receiving yards. A bit of a step back in 2024 with only 900 receiving yards, but he still had 10 touchdowns. So he's a bit of a touchdown threat. You know, he might be in the red zone offense, definitely whatever team he gets drafted to. The thing is, both of these guys are going to get maybe late day 2 draft picks on them, so the teams aren't going to be invested in them as you know, whether or not they took a round 1 or round 2 draft pick. If they're using a round 3, round 4 pick on these guys, we're not going to have super high expectations in fantasy right off the bat. Savion Williams, I very, very like. This is my sleeper. The reason he's in my sleeper, TCU Frogs. All right, 2023, 41 catches, 573 yards, 4 touchdowns. Not great as a receiver. 2024, 60 receptions, 600 receiving yards, 6 touchdowns. A step up. That's good. Oh, it's not good because it's the same stats as Isaiah Bond, who I said was bad. But he also had 51 carries, 322 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns. As a receiver, that's right. They used him as a dual threat receiver and running back. Now, typically these players don't acclimate to the NFL. You know, you're either a wide receiver or a running back. You're not both. But Deebo Samuel, he's a wide receiver and a running back in the NFL. So look for Savion Williams, man. He had, again, 12 total touchdowns, 6 in the air, 6 on the ground. Savion Williams could be a fantasy football league winner, and he's a late round draft pick. Kyron Lacy, LSU. Now, this guy could get decent draft capital in the draft. He has had solid seasons. 2024, 865 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. He also is, I'm pretty sure, wanted for murder. He just did there's some wild news on this guy. Might have to move him down my draft board. We already talked on Jalen Milroe. The rushing upside of this guy could really, really help his fantasy football draft stock, which is why he's got to be on everyone's radar. This guy is another very good sleeper. Again, I did my research. These guys, I know most of these guys by name and then what I've researched about them. Harold Finnan Jr., this guy has set records in college football. Now, he did play for Bowling Green. So who's he playing? Who's he really playing? They went 7-6. I mean, who's he playing against, right? The talent. In 2024, 117 receptions, 1,555 receiving yards, 10 touchdowns, 9 carries, 65 yards, and a touchdown. This guy set records for tight end receiving, and that is wild in a sense of its own. The reason he's the 3rd tight end on the board is because Colston Loveland, again, I'm kind of confused on Loveland. I get he's Big Ten, good talent. He had 600 receiving yards. Somebody in the comments will explain why he's so high. Tyler Warren, I understand. Tyler Warren was against good talent, and he was number 3 or 4 in the Heisman. So I understand that, but I think I would not mind if you're in a tight end premium league taking a flyer on Harold Finnan Jr. ahead some of these other guys ahead of him. We'll have to see how his combine goes, how the draft goes, where his landing spot is, but he's got upside for sure. Dylan Sampson is up next. We have a couple running backs here. Now, Dylan Sampson in 2024, he had 1,500 rushing yards and 143 receiving yards. So the reception upside isn't as high as some of these other guys you would like to see. He had 22 rushing touchdowns. Don't mind if I do. He had 22 rushing touchdowns for the Tennessee Volunteers. That's a crazy amount of touchdowns. And if that translates to the NFL, that would be crazy. I've also seen him linked to the Kansas City Chiefs in a couple mock drafts. Would be a very good landing spot. But these guys right here at the bottom of this list, man, they're not going to get high draft capital. So you're not too excited about drafting them. You're really chasing the ceiling right here. Kyle Monengai, and also the landing spots as well. These guys had back-to-back 1,300 rushing yard seasons. Basically no receiving upside, which is a bit disappointing. He might be able to find himself, in an offense maybe where he's the RB3. Maybe with injuries he goes higher on that depth chart. Not too exciting, but the rushing upside is there. Damian Martinez is up next. Damian Martinez has three 1,000-yard rushing seasons in a row. And in 2024, he only had 17 receptions, but he turned them into 204 receiving yards. So that's almost like an 18-yard reception average. That's not bad at all for the receiving. Maybe he gets some higher receiving upside in the NFL if they give him some more opportunities. Damian Martinez should be on people's radar. Devin Neal. Devin Neal had, in his last 3 seasons, 1,100 rushing yards, 1,300 rushing yards, 1,300 rushing yards. And this guy does have a bit more reception volume, averaging around 25 receptions a year, averaging around 250 receiving yards a year, and 250 receiving yards in 2024. So again, this guy played at Kansas. He has the profile to be an NFL running back. Could be a 3rd down back somewhere to start. So we could see him potentially grow in the NFL. Now we have a receiver, Jaden Higgins. Jaden Higgins played for the Iowa State Cyclones And in 2024, he had 1,200 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns. Not shabby at all. He's not going to get the best draft capital put in him, but people are actually talking about Jaden Higgins potentially being a boom, like a boom type player. People are talking about Jaden Higgins being higher than Savion Williams, higher than Kyron Lacy, which I don't mind. You know, I'm moving Kyron Lacy down. I do like Savion Williams having the rushing upside. We'll see what the NFL scouts are saying about him. Then we have DJ Giddens. He had a really solid last year at Kansas State with 1,300 plus yards. And then lastly, we have Jack Beck right here. Jack Beck, he had 1,000 receiving yards, 9 touchdowns on the season for the team that he played for, which is the TCU Horned Frogs. He was right there with Savion Williams, and Jack Beck was kind of the alpha type player. So that's my top 35 players. That's my big board. The next step of this, boys, I want you to comment down below. What prospects am I missing from this list? I'll add the prospects. If you give me a name, I'll throw them in where I think they belong. I'll move people up. I'll move people down. In fact, might have to be doing that sooner rather than later. But the next step is the mock draft. So make sure you smash the subscribe button so you don't miss out. I'm excited to do a couple mock drafts with my big board. Peace out. Thanks for watching.